Hello, this is Scott from DailyExposition.com, and today I want to help those of you using the MyArcade plugin. As you know, this is an ongoing series, but this one isn't so much about the core plugin, but it is about the W3Total Cache and other caching plugins similar to it. If you are on shared hosting, you are allowed to have an arcade site. They're not typically too heavy on bandwidth to absurd amounts like videos, but they are still kind of hefty. Not only that, but you want to keep your inode usage fairly low. An inode is any file on a Linux system. Every file is an inode, and they don't want you having more than typically 250,000. Well, when we get something like W3Total Cache, our first assumption is, alright, we enable all the caching configurations and we should be good. That's a good way to do it if you want to get yourself banned from hosting like a lot of websites. What you want to do is, I'm going to give you the basic settings that I have, and for my website, the minification of the Fun Games theme is not going to be covered in this tutorial, but it's mostly focused on the caching. I'll show you the minifying for Fun Games in a later video. The page cache it'll cache the page to reduce the load time of it initially. This is typically the only one you'll ever really want, the only one that you'll ever really need for physical caching. So I always do enable and then enhanced. For minification, always do enable it, and I typically do manual, mostly because I can configure it better than the plugin can automatically. Always do the default HTML minifier, unless you find HTML tidy to work. On many sites it doesn't, therefore I always leave it to default. Now, in your database caching, this is not that useful for this plugin. Database caching will cache your database, which will reduce the creation time for a post, a page, or even an update to your feed. You can enable this, but typically hosting providers don't want you to do it, especially on this one where it's very heavy on your database. Creating a cache of it every time can cause spikes in your performance and of your CPU usage, so I don't recommend you using this. Object caching, or what I call the death of all websites, is what causes a lot of pages to be banned. And here's why. An object cache will reduce the time to do any operation, such as recovering an image or just getting the game or getting a page. Every time you do that, you're gonna, let's say I have 5,000 games. It's going to have a cache of that game 5,000 times over. So instead of having 5,000, you have 10,000 inodes. Then you got to count in each of your images. And if you have 5,000 images for that, you're doubling your usage because it's keeping a cached version of it instead of calling in of the physical file. It does load faster, and if you have inodes to spare, then by all means use the object cache. However, it's not a very smart thing to do. If you're on a shared hosting, you will get banned. However, if you are on a hosting that is a dedicated server, using this is wonderful. If you're using a service such as WordPress engine, you won't even have this plugin in the first place because it's all handled on their database level. Everything they do is held on the server level as opposed to your site. So if you're using a shared hosting, which most people are, disable both the database and object caching. That should be your standard for it because while it does increase the performance slightly, it can cause issues with inode usage and performance issues of your server, which ultimately can hurt your load time more than it benefits you. This isn't just a scam from the hosting companies, it's a pain in the butt to handle for the server. So by all means, do not enable it. If you have a CDN, you can configure it through these settings. I don't have one, but it's fairly easy. Enable it and you'll be able to set the files such as CSS, JS. I even recommend doing your game files because this will take a heavy load off your server. Because a game, even if it's 30 kilobits and you have more than one person calling it in at a time, that can hurt your load time severely. So if you have a CDN, you'll be able to configure it properly. I don't have one, so we'll skip that setting. I do use Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a great tool for this. I always enable the rocket loader, which will load all your scripts through pipelining, which does decrease the load time greatly, and it ultimately will help convert new users. Your security level should be set to high because there's a lot of spammers on WordPress, and these 13 comments are probably not from actual users. They're probably from bots. So I recommend that you set the security level to high to help reduce it. Never set it to I'm under attack because it will block your legitimate users and warn them that you're typically under a DDoS attack, which is the only time you really ever find that useful. I also enable the edge mode, which allows it to get new features. This isn't necessary by any means, but it can help improve the load time slightly if you have the new settings properly configured. Now you're going to go into your page cache and we're going to configure this a little bit. Cache the front page always. Cache site feeds, the categories, tags, and comments. You can cache SSL. If you are using an SSL, use it. If you're not, don't ever activate this. Cache request only from this URL. I don't normally cache pages for logged in users. If you are going to cache it, then don't enable the cache for administrators or anyone that is below the rank of author. Typically, this is only good for if you're allowing login users to have a cache page. It shouldn't only show a cache page to those who are changing the looks of a site or optimizing it, because otherwise you're just going to have to keep deleting the cache, which can be very annoying. The cache preload, update the interval 1000 seconds, the number of seconds to wait before creating another set of cache pages. This will help reduce server load. Pages per interval, I do 10. Don't do absurd amounts with this because you will hurt your load time. And this is an add-on that comes with the Yoast extension for W3Total Cache. And then if you come down to your advanced and do not enable the compatibility mode. By doing so, you can hurt your performance, and we want this to be as fast as we can. Everything else should come pretty standard. The next thing you want to do is go to your browser cache, which is the only other caching system that we're using. Set the last modified header. Set the expires header. Set your cache control header. The entity, the W3Total Cache, and the enable gzip. And we don't need to do this, or this, or this. Every other setting should come standard. The goal is when you're caching your page is to get the page to load fastest, so that way they have something to look at. While caching things such as images and the games can help, risking your chance of getting banned or not having backups on your server is definitely not worth it. That is all I have for you in this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned for the next video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, put them below and I'll make sure to answer them. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.